And I'm going to kind of preach on it, and I will just kind of paraphrase, and then I will work on this gospel for another Sunday, okay? So the gospel that I prepared on today was the gospel where Jesus comes into Jerusalem and gets really angry about the money changers in the temple. And he goes in and he takes the cord and he wraps it up and he uses it to drive out all those money changers. And the reason that he did this was because they were taking advantage of poor people in the temple. In other words, people would come to this temple from way far away and they would need to make sacrifices. And so in order to help them out, the people would have doves and different things that they could buy in order to sacrifice at the temple. But the money changers were actually, the people were really getting the wrong end of the deal. They were being taken advantage of. And it was great injustice. And Jesus was furious. And so he goes in, he throws over the tables, and he drives out all these people that were doing business in the temple. And he said something along the lines of, "My Father's house will not be made." Remember, "My Father's house will not be made in a marketplace," or something like that. John will look it up for me. So my premise today was all about anger. Like, when is anger useful? Because this particular passage that is in the gospel is a passage about Jesus being angry and acting according to that anger. And a lot of times we will use that as an excuse to lose it. We'll use that episode in the gospel as an opportunity to have a fit, to be angry. And so what I wondered when I thought about this was, so when is anger useful? When does anger suit us? Because if you think about it, we typically don't think of anger as a positive thing. We typically think of anger as being something very scary, something very violent, something very abusive, and it's that way towards other people. It can cause great harm, and it also can be not just physical harm, but emotional harm, emotional scars, abuse of all kinds. But on top of that, if we harbor anger in ourselves, if we have a short fuse or whatever, if we have road rage or tendencies to that, then we are harming ourselves. And we all know this. There have been lots of studies to that we can have a heart attack if we make ourselves so upset, or we can actually or have guilt and remorse and all kinds of bad things. So we don't usually look at anger as a good thing. So what exactly is anger? What's the definition of anger? Anger is an emotion, right? And the emotions that we feel, you probably know this, are actually chemicals out of our bodies, out of our physical bodies, that run up the neurotransmitter route into our brain, and our brain runs stuff back to our bodies, so we feel a certain way. And typically, when our anger gets roused up, when we feel anger, it's typically because something is not going the way we perceive that it should go. It could be we feel that indignation for some injustice, probably like Jesus did in the passage that I quoted, or it could be that it's a frustration of again, things are not going the way we think they ought to go. And depending on that level, and we all know this, there's kind of a continuum. We can totally lose our top just lose it. Or we can just get snippy or get frustrated or kind of argumentative. Sometimes we even have passive-aggressive behaviors. So it's this wide continuum. What I think, and who knows if this is right or not, but I think sometimes our anger can kind of bypass that front part of our brain that we call our cognitive thinking, where we can think. And it goes right to a part of our brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is where that fight or flight thing happens in us. So it goes back kind of to an animal instinct where we kind of lose our mind. And I think, now the psychologists don't agree with me. They just say, the psychologists say, okay, we've got emotions, and we've got fear, we've got anger, we've got sadness, and from my perspective, those emotions range from love to fear, and then like at this end of the spectrum, we've got love, joy, peace, happiness, all positive ones. And on the other side, you've got fear, and probably right above fear is anger. And so I think that if you peel the onion, that when we are angry, when things aren't going the way we want it to go, probably that is a kind of a sign of some kind of fear. We're afraid we're afraid it's not right, we're afraid it's not going to turn out right, and so that kind of, I think, feeds our anger. Fear feeds our anger. So, when I have a couple of examples of where, for me, my thinking brain got completely bypassed to that animal brain. And I've told you this story before, but actually this kind of thing happened twice to me. I live downtown. And one time, in the middle of the night, this is the story I told you, in the middle of the night, somebody tried to break in, and I lost my mind and went kind of after that person, and it kind of scared him because he wasn't expecting anybody to be home, and he left, thankfully. Well, another time, I was kind of walking down the hall and glanced through the bedroom door, and there was somebody in the bedroom window. This was in the late afternoon. It was after dark in the wintertime, but it wasn't late at night. And I saw this person in the window. And, people that have sense would say, okay, call 911, call the police, get yourself in a safe place. But I kind of lose that thinking brain and go straight to, I'm going to get them. And so I run out of the house as fast as I can. And of course they see me leave the opening in the doorway, and they take off. By the time I get to where they are, they're gone, and I don't know which direction they went in, thankfully. In retrospect, thankfully. I've also been known, since I've been at Cedar Hill, people drop off dogs all the time there, and so when you have a pack of dogs, you typically have fights, dog fights, literal dog fights. And I have done this more than I'd like to confess, but I have jumped in the middle of literal dog fights. And I have had so many fights that I would say I might have learned not to jump into the middle of dog fights, but I'm not going to make any promises because I lose this part of my mind and go into this kind of fight or flight kind of thing. So when would becoming angry be helpful? Because I'm not going to talk today about curbing your anger or fixing your anger or working on ways to mitigate your anger and prevent you from having whatever outburst you have. That's another sermon. You may get one of those one of these days. But what I want to talk about is what's good about anger? How can that help us? And I want to go back to Aristotle, in his book he wrote about ethics. He said if anger is used in the right way, I'm paraphrasing, by the way. If anger is used in the right way, with the right person, at the right time, and of the right duration, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. There's a lady by the name of Molly Osmond, I think. And she, that doesn't sound right, but anyway, it's something like that. And she writes that she likens anger to a sheriff who comes into play when something isn't right. Remember I said this emotion comes up when something we perceive is not right or is wrong or some injustice. So she says it's like the sheriff coming in to right the wrong. Here comes anger with the big sheriff badge. Now, if the sheriff is a good sheriff and has his wits about him or her wits about her, if she uses the front part of her brain and is able to come into a situation that is wrong or by that perception wrong, then the sheriff can use that energy that's coming together for a good purpose. However, if the sheriff is a hothead, if the sheriff actually runs on ego and adrenaline, there is a likelihood that the outcome of the sheriff's work will not be positive. Will not be positive. So in order for anger to be a positive force in our lives, it's really important that we don't lose our minds. It's really important that we take this energy that is generated by those chemicals in our body when we perceive something is not quite right, and we utilize that in the highest way we can. That's the undergirding of the 4 ways I'm going to share with you that anger can help us. So the first way is it's a motivating force. Anger can be a motivating force. And you may or may not know this. If you've ever played sports, or you've ever been in the military, or if you've ever had a teacher that loved you and you knew they loved you, and they knew when they were using this kind of harsh encouragement that they were doing it for your best interest, but it made you angry, and that anger propelled you into a higher standard of being or a higher standard of doing. I mean, that can backfire. You know, somebody comes from an abusive home and their sergeant starts yelling at them, then they can dissolve really quickly. But a lot of times, if they don't have that history, the anger at the sergeant will actually give them what it takes to allow them to do the next level of whatever activity that they're doing. And we see it in training, we see it in coaching. And the other thing that it does for us is it can help us solve problems. It can help us right wrongs. We have the energy and the impetus to overcome whatever challenges have been presented to us, and it empowers us to be able to do things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do because that anger energy is very powerful. It's very powerful. So that's one way we can use anger to actually help us. Anger can benefit relationships. Now, you might not think of that. You might think, well, how in the world can I be angry at this person I love and it will be beneficial? Well, think about it. And I'll give you an example myself. When I was young, I loved to read. I still love to read. But when I was reading these books, my mom would be cleaning the house. And she would be very angry at me. Because I was reading a book and not helping her clean the house. Well, if she just kept that energy pent up inside and held it in, then it would probably come out in passive-aggressive ways, or it would make her sick. It would make her sick. It wouldn't be a good thing. But if she communicated in a good way to me, or maybe even in a harsher way, that she needed help and that I needed to help her, then she allows that communication, that honest communication, to go between us, and hopefully it would resolve the issue. Hopefully I would put the book down and get up and help her. Now, I don't know about you, but I can think of a million examples of that kind of scenario. You know, somebody's in the kitchen washing the dishes while somebody's watching TV, and everybody ate, but there's only one person cleaning up, and everybody else is scooping around. Have you all ever had those experiences? So anger can be a good thing if you have a good sheriff come and use your head and work through for a resolution or a solving of the problem. Expressing anger in a constructive way is a form of honest communication. Expression is justifiable if aimed at finding a resolution. And you've also heard that fences make good neighbors. Have you ever heard that? It's a real old thing. Well, anger can actually be a kind of fence. One time I had 3 priests at my retreat center on a week-long retreat. They were really good friends. They had gone to seminary together, and they got together every year to spend time together in retreat. Well, I told you I always have all these dogs around, right? Well, I had found this dog that was just perfect for one of these people, and he had just lost his elderly dog. So we're all sitting around the table, and I'm saying, I said, you know, I really think you ought to take that dog home. That dog would be a great addition to your family. It would make your wife so happy, and I knew that for sure. And so the other 2 priests, who knew him well, got on the bandwagon. And so we're all going, yeah, you ought to take the dog, you ought to take the dog. And you could just see him start doing this. And all of a sudden, we knew, because anger provides social cues, does it not? That he was building a fence, and that we were getting awful close to going over it. So anger can be really good for relationships if it's used in the right way. And that's an example of it. They say that anger is a healthier and more positive response to a situation than fear is. Again, I think I said that, not me, not the psychologist, but I think anger is a version of fear. But they did studies on people after 9/11 who, whether they were angry that 9/11 happened, or whether they were afraid, had the emotion of fear that 9/11 had happened. And when they looked at both of those studies, the people who were angry had a far more positive outlook on whether we would be invaded or attacked again. And the people who were afraid did not. They had a lesser response, a more negative response. I kind of think that's about control, about feeling empowered maybe. I think maybe not even control, but being empowered. Because anger empowers us. And when we're sunk into the bottom of fear, we feel victimized and as a victim. So fear can be anger can be a better response than fear. And they've also shown, and this is very ironic, but you can get this, anger can reduce violence. Now, how could that be? Kind of back to my friend with the dog. It's a very strong social signal that we need to resolve the situation before it deteriorates further. Now, usually in the groups we run with, or at least the groups I run with, people don't come to blows very often, if ever. And so I would say that part of that is because we can recognize those social signs of anger and we back off. And it also encourages resolution. It encourages reconciliation. It helps us. Like if we think somebody, like that guy at the table, was getting ready to blow his top, we're going to back off. We're going to actually appease him in some way in that particular situation so that he doesn't blow his top. So anger can serve in really good ways, even to prevent violence. Anger also promotes self-awareness, self-insight, and personal growth. If we notice when we get angry, it might motivate us to self-improvement. It also might give us insight into our own faults. If we listen to our anger, we might hear messages that we would otherwise not hear. I think I've shared with you many times, or sometimes anyway, that, you know, when I start getting really bossy, or when I start feeling that anger come up in me, the first thing I ask myself, if I have my brain about me, is, what am I afraid of right now? What's making me afraid? And usually that's all it takes is to reframe an entire situation, is to recognize that why I'm angry has nothing to do with somebody else, but it has everything to do with what's going on inside of me. It's a great self-awareness tool. The primary differences between positive outcomes of anger and negative outcomes of anger is whether we allow the fight or flight response to shut down the thinking part of our brain, whether we are in control of this emotion, or whether the emotion is in control of us. And I believe that depending on whether we are operating from a deep fear or a deep love determines whether anger can be beneficial or not. And so how is this tied to self-care? Because, you know, that's what we're doing. What we're doing over Lent is we're working on self-care. We're using scriptures to look at how we can take better care of ourselves so that we can be ready for building God's kingdom. Well, if we recognize that anger is not necessarily a terrible or bad thing, if we recognize that it can be utilized for good, then that empowers us to be able to stand up for ourselves and for others in an injustice situation. It helps us right wrongs. It helps us build our muscles in terms of being able to take things to the next level. And I think all of that is an expression of self-care. When we take up for ourselves and we take up for our loved ones, we're showing we're worth it. We're worth it.